The smell of pot roast filled the dining room, but it didn't soften the words that cut across the table. My mom set down her fork like she was delivering a verdict. "We sold the house. We're moving tomorrow. Amber, you're not coming. You've got 1 month to get out." My dad didn't even flinch. "Crying won't save you. Life's tough, deal with it." Sarah smirked, sipping her soda. "Guess you'll finally learn to fend for yourself." Emma laughed so hard she nearly choked. "Better start looking under bridges, sis." I sat frozen fork trembling in my hand, heat rushing to my face. My chest tightened. I wanted to speak to beg, but no sound came. For the first time, I truly felt disposable. It wasn't always silence that hurt me the most. It was the noise of celebrations I was never part of. When I was 16, my birthday landed on a Tuesday. I came home from school hoping just maybe they had planned something. Instead, Mom was on the couch, watching TV. Dad was scrolling through his phone, and Sarah and Emma were giggling in the kitchen about a party they'd been invited to. A plain grocery store cake sat on the counter, still in its plastic box. The frosting had my name squeezed across it in thin blue letters that looked rushed, almost like a joke. Mom finally looked up and said, "Happy birthday, Amber. Cut yourself a piece before it melts." Then she turned back to the sitcom. No candles, no singing. Just the hum of the television laugh track filling the gap where my family's voices should have been. 5 years later, when Sarah turned 16, our house looked like a nightclub. A DJ blasted music so loud the walls shook. Colored lights flickered, balloons filled the ceiling, and every kid in her class was there. My parents hovered proudly, taking photos and handing out sodas. I stood in the corner stacking cups and refilling chip bowls invisible. When the music peaked, a picture frame on the wall rattled loose and crashed to the floor. It was a family photo from a Florida vacation I hadn't been invited to. The glass cracked across all their smiling faces. I picked it up, tucked it under the couch, and kept sweeping confetti while no one noticed. Vacations were always like that. Every summer they'd pack bags and drive to beaches or theme parks. Mom would say, "Someone has to watch the house, Amber. You're responsible." I'd wave from the porch as the car pulled away, pretending I didn't care. At night, I'd sit in my room scrolling through Facebook photos of them on roller coasters, holding ice cream cones, hugging relatives I barely knew. Their captions said, "family time." I'd stare at the screen and think apparently I wasn't part of that word. Christmas should have been better, but it never was. The tree glittered with ornaments and piles of wrapped gifts that grew like mountains beneath it. Sarah and Emma tore into theirs, shrieking with joy over phones, laptops, brand-name clothes. When it was my turn, I had 2 boxes, one with socks, the other with notebooks for school. "Practical gifts," Dad said, nodding like it was wise. My sisters drowned in laughter and wrapping paper while I folded my socks quietly. At 15, I decided I was done waiting for generosity. I picked up a part-time job at the local grocery store after school, bagging groceries until my shoulders ached. With my first paychecks, I bought a used laptop from a pawn shop. The keys rattled, the screen flickered sometimes, but it was mine. I signed up for a free programming class at school, and for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Code didn't play favorites. If you wrote it right, it worked. No smirks, no dismissals, no. Not good enough. Just logic. By the time I graduated high school, I had taught myself enough to know programming could be more than a hobby. I applied to every college I could afford, and even some I couldn't, hoping for scholarships. The night I got my first acceptance letter, I told my parents over dinner, my voice shaking with excitement. I got in. They gave me a partial scholarship, but I'll need some help with the rest. Dad didn't even look up from his plate. "We're not paying for your college. We're saving that money for Sarah and Emma." I stared at my food, waiting for anyone to speak up for me. Mom just nodded in agreement. Sarah smirked. Emma giggled. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. That's okay. The state university gave me a full ride. Free was free. Pride tasted bitter that night, but at least it was mine. College became my sanctuary. I met Jake in a computer lab that smelled of dust and overheated wires. He was quick with a joke and quicker with code. We started building small projects together, inventory systems for mom and pop shops, invoicing tools for local businesses. When we got our first check that didn't bounce, Jake threw his arms in the air like we'd won the lottery. I laughed so hard I cried. For once, tears didn't feel like weakness. But home was still the same. Every holiday break, I'd come back to an empty seat at the dinner table, while my sisters shared inside jokes from trips I hadn't been on. They flaunted souvenirs, told stories, and never once noticed how quiet I was. When Sarah got her first car for her 18th birthday, a shiny red compact, everyone went outside to admire it. I stood on the porch steps, clapping politely. My 18th gift had been a $20 bill and a congrats on graduating card. Graduation day from college should have been a milestone. I sent invitations, but no one in my family came. Sarah had a volleyball tournament, and Dad said that was more important. I walked across the stage holding my diploma case with trembling hands, while Jake's parents waved at me from the crowd. They treated me like their own, cheering louder than anyone else. It was comforting, but also gutting because my real family hadn't bothered. A week later, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "Now that you're done with school, you'll start paying rent, $800 a month, and buy your own groceries. We're not a charity." I nodded. Okay. She seemed disappointed that I didn't argue, but the truth was, $800 was nothing compared to what Jake and I were making. We'd started our own software company crammed into a dingy office with bad lighting and fast internet. We poured every cent we earned back into the business. While my parents thought I was broke, I was actually making more than Dad ever had. But I kept the same beat-up car, the same worn-out clothes. Better to stay invisible. Through it all, I carried the same gnawing question in my chest. What did I do wrong? Why was I never enough? Each ignored birthday, each empty chair at my milestones, each laugh at my expense carved the answer deeper. Maybe I wasn't family to them at all. But what they didn't realize, what they never bothered to see, was that every slight, every forgotten moment, every cruel smirk was fuel. They were teaching me to survive without them, to build a life where their approval didn't matter. And by the time they tried to throw me away, I was already stronger than they ever imagined. The night I stumbled across the listing, it felt like being gutted. I wasn't even looking for trouble. Jake and I had just finished a marathon coding session, and I was lying in bed scrolling real estate sites on my laptop. We had finally reached the point where I could afford to move out, maybe even buy my own place. I typed in my zip code, half curious, half dreaming. A row of thumbnails popped up: ordinary kitchens, bland beige walls, ugly carpet. Then one picture froze me. A bedroom. My bedroom. I clicked it, and the photo expanded to fill the screen. There was my desk in the corner, the dent in the carpet where my chair sat, my bookshelf crammed with programming manuals, even the crooked poster I'd taped up years ago, every detail of my private world exposed online like some cheap product on a store shelf. My stomach turned. The caption read, "Charming 4-bedroom family home. Spacious bedrooms, move-in ready." They were selling my space, my history, me. I scrolled through the gallery with shaking hands. Living room, kitchen. The backyard where I used to sit with my laptop under the one shady tree. Room after room, each picture proof that my parents hadn't just decided to move, they'd decided to erase me in the process. For a second, I thought I might throw up. I slammed the laptop shut, heart hammering so hard it hurt. I couldn't breathe. My own family had listed the house without a single word to me. Not even the courtesy of a warning. They weren't just leaving me behind. They were selling the floor beneath my feet. I wanted to scream, to call Mom and demand answers, but I already knew what she'd say. Something cold, something practical. You're old enough to figure it out. I imagined Dad's shrug, Sarah's smirk, Emma's laughter. They'd treat my panic like a punchline. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the shadows on my walls sharp as knives. My pillow felt too thin, my blankets too heavy. My own room, my only refuge, suddenly wasn't mine. Every memory I had nights, coding until sunrise, birthdays spent alone with a cupcake, the quiet ache of being invisible, All of it was now someone else's spacious listing. Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't change anything. By morning, my shock had hardened into something colder. I went through the motions, work meetings, debugging lines of code, but beneath every keystroke was a pulsing thought. If they can treat me like baggage, I can treat them like strangers. That evening, I told Jake. He nearly dropped his coffee. They're selling your house while you still live there. Yeah, I said flatly. Pictures of my room and everything. Jesus, Amber. He stopped searching for a word big enough to hold the betrayal. He didn't find one. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm going to buy it. For a moment, he thought I was joking. Then he saw I wasn't. His grin faded into awe. That's insane. Brilliant, but insane. Not in my name, I added. Through the company. They'll think it's just some investment group. They won't have a clue. The idea lit a fire in me I hadn't felt before. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming something. They wanted me out, fine. I'd let them walk away thinking I was disposable. But I'd make sure the ground they walked off of still belonged to me. The next week blurred into paperwork and calls with a real estate agent. Jake handled the logistics while I sat quietly in meetings signing documents with steady hands. Each signature felt like a declaration, you don't control me anymore. At night, I lay in bed surrounded by boxes I hadn't packed, listening to the house creak in the dark. For the first time, I wasn't imagining leaving. I was imagining staying and knowing the walls answered to me now. Still, the hurt lingered. I kept replaying the moment I saw that listing, the cold rush of betrayal. Part of me wanted to burst into the dining room and shove the paperwork in their faces, scream, "Look at me now," but I didn't. That would be giving them too much. Let them believe I was powerless. Let them think I was headed for the streets. The satisfaction would come later. Quiet, undeniable, unshakable. One night, I overheard them in the hallway. I had my door cracked just enough to hear Mom's voice calm and almost smug. She'll figure it out. Maybe this will finally motivate her. Dad chuckled. About time she learns life isn't free. Their footsteps faded, leaving me in silence so thick it roared in my ears. I sat on my bed, fists clenched, nails digging crescents into my palms. They thought throwing me out would motivate me, as if I hadn't spent years motivating myself because they never lifted a finger. As if my entire life hadn't been proof I could survive without them, I whispered into the dark, steady and sure. You're not getting rid of me. Not this time. That whisper became my anchor. By the time the sale closed, my name wasn't on the deed, but my will was carved into every brick of that house. They thought they'd cut me off. In reality, they'd handed me the one thing I needed most proof I never needed them at all. The morning they left the house was stripped of everything except my room and the kitchen appliances. Boxes clattered down the stairs, movers grunted through the front door, and my parents barked instructions like generals preparing for victory. I stood in the hallway invisible while Sarah dragged her suitcase past me. She paused just long enough to smirk. Better start hunting for a cardboard box, Amber. That's about all you'll afford. Emma trailed behind, giggling as she clutched her duffel bag. Or maybe she can live in that junker car, if it even starts. Dad's voice boomed from the driveway. Let's go. The movers are done. Amber, remember you've got exactly 1 month before the new owners toss you out. Mom smiled that thin, cold smile. I suggest you start packing today. The front door slammed. The car rolled away. The rumble of the moving truck faded down the street. And for the first time, the house was silent, truly silent. I sank onto the bare living room floor. The carpet was flattened where the couch used to be, leaving ghostly rectangles of dust. Sunlight streamed through the empty space, too bright, too sharp. The quiet pressed against me heavy and final. For a flicker of a second, I felt a wave of panic, like maybe they were right. Maybe I was nothing but a girl about to be evicted from her own life. Then I pulled out my phone, dialed Jake, and whispered into the emptiness. They're gone. bring pizza and beer. An hour later, we sat cross-legged on the carpet, greasy boxes spread between us. The room echoed with our laughter as we clinked beer bottles together. "You're unbelievable," Jake said, shaking his head. "Your parents literally sold their house to you and still think you'll be on the street. I don't even have a word for it." I smirked, grease shining on my fingers. Poetic. That's the word. Poetic. That night, I walked through every room, each one bare, and echoing each one, technically, mine. I touched the walls, the banister, the window frames. For years, this place had been a cage of indifference, every corner soaked with memories of being overlooked. Now it was a fortress, mine to reshape, mine to reclaim. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before I went shopping for myself without guilt. Not the bargain bin scavenging I was used to, but real shopping. I ordered a sectional couch big enough to stretch across a sleek dining table that didn't wobble and a bed frame that didn't squeak with every breath. I bought stainless steel appliances, a 70-inch TV, and a coffee machine that hissed like it belonged in a European cafe. Each delivery that arrived felt like a piece of me being restored. Where there had once been emptiness, I layered comfort. Where there had been coldness, I installed warmth. I wasn't just filling a house with furniture, I was stitching my own life back together. But the real counterattack wasn't the furniture. It was silence. While my family made new plans while Sarah Instagrammed her dorm and Emma bragged about her bigger bedroom, I said nothing. No calls, no texts, not even a slip that I was still here. Let them believe I was curled up in panic hunting for an apartment I couldn't afford. Meanwhile, I was drinking espresso in the kitchen. They'd abandoned my laptop, humming with contracts worth more than Dad's lifetime salary. Our company exploded after the first big deal. Word spread that Jake and I had built something unique and clients poured in. We worked late nights, hired 2 more programmers, upgraded to a larger office. Money flowed in numbers that no longer felt real. Some mornings I'd check my bank account and laugh out loud, remembering Mom's voice sneering, "We're not a charity, Amber. Pay your rent." And still, I kept the same beat-up Civic in the driveway. Still wore the same faded jeans. Let the neighbors gossip about poor Amber, abandoned and broke. Every rumor was a shield protecting the truth until I was ready. On my 26th birthday, I threw myself a real party, my first. Nothing wild, just Jake, his girlfriend, and a few close friends from work. We piled food on the new dining table, drank wine in the living room, and laughed until my sides ached. For once, my birthday wasn't forgotten. For once, the people around me actually wanted me there. As I blew out the candles, I thought, this is what family feels like. Not the blood that betrays you, but the people who choose you. 6 months slipped by in a rhythm of work laughter and quiet satisfaction. I planted flowers in the front yard, painted the walls colors I liked, not colors Mom picked, hung art that spoke to me. Sometimes when I passed the cracked family photo I'd pulled from under the couch years ago, I almost threw it away. Instead, I set it on a shelf in the attic. Not because I cherished it, but because scars don't disappear. They just remind you where you've healed. And through it all, I never said a word to my parents. I let them carry on believing I was days away from eviction. Let them feel superior in their cruelty. Because the sweetest revenge was silence. The kind that grows heavy. The kind that waits. The kind that eventually echoes louder than any scream. It started with a phone call I almost ignored. My cell buzzed across the kitchen counter, flashing Mom. For 6 months, there had been nothing but silence, and I'd learned to love it. No cutting remarks, no dismissive laughter, no pretending I mattered at their table. I should have let it go to voicemail. But curiosity won. "Hello," I said flatly. Her voice came sharp, clipped. "Amber, what is going on? Mrs. Peterson called me yesterday. She said she's seen you bringing in new furniture. She says your car is still parked in the driveway every night. Why are you still in that house?" For a second, I almost laughed. Of course, the nosiest neighbor on the block would be the one to ruin my peace. I pressed my lips together. "Because I live here," I said calmly. "You can't live there. The new owners should have kicked you out months ago." I leaned back against the counter, letting the silence stretch. Maybe the new owners didn't mind. There was a pause, sharp, uneasy. Amber, Mom hissed, "Don't play games with me. Who are they? Why haven't they moved in?" I smiled to myself, though she couldn't see it. "You'll figure it out." Then I hung up. The next Saturday, I got my answer. A car crunched into the driveway. When I peeked through the blinds, I saw all 4 of them, Mom, Dad, Sarah, and Emma, marching up the front steps like they owned the place. My stomach tightened, but not from fear, from anticipation. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come in," I said evenly. They filed into the living room, their eyes darting everywhere. The sectional couch, the giant TV, the gleaming appliances, they were seeing a different house than the one they left behind. Sarah's jaw dropped. Emma's mouth actually hung open. Dad muttered something under his breath that sounded a lot like Jesus Christ. Mom recovered first. Her eyes narrowed. "Amber, explain. Where did you get the money for all this, and why are you still here?" I shrugged, sitting down on the couch like I had all the time in the world. "I told you on the phone. I live here." "That's impossible," Sarah snapped. "You don't make that kind of money. You couldn't even afford an apartment." "I do all right," I said lightly. Emma crossed her arms, her voice rising. "If you're rich now, then buy me a car. Mom says we can't afford one, and it's not fair you get all this while I'm stuck taking the bus." Dad shot her a warning look, but his eyes stayed glued to the TV mounted on the wall. His voice was low, strained. "Amber, be serious. How are you paying for all this? Did you win the lottery?" "No lottery." Mom's voice broke in urgent and desperate. "Amber, listen, we've had some financial setbacks. The new house is more expensive than we thought. Sarah's tuition is due and Emma needs money for her senior trip. We need your help. It's the right thing to do. We're family." I let the word hang in the air like smoke. Family. A word that used to feel like a promise but had always been a lie. "You need my help?" I asked slowly. "That's funny. Because when I needed yours, when I needed support for college, or even just someone at my graduation, you couldn't be bothered. When I asked for nothing but your presence, you gave me excuses." Mom's eyes flickered, but she pressed on. "We made mistakes, Amber, but we can fix them now. We love you. We just didn't realize how much you were struggling." That broke something in me, not in the way she hoped, but in a way that steeled me. Struggling. You laughed at me. You left me home every vacation to watch the house. You threw parties for Sarah and Emma while you couldn't even remember my birthday. You demanded rent from me while treating me like a tenant, not a daughter. Don't stand here now pretending you didn't know exactly what you were doing. Sarah tried to cut in. "We didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. Every smirk, every joke, every time you made me the punchline, it meant exactly what it looked like. I was never part of this family, not in the way you wanted. I was convenient when you needed me, invisible when you didn't, and disposable when you finally sold the house out from under me. The room went still. For once, none of them had a comeback. Even Emma's whining dried up. Finally, Dad tried. "We can start over. We can be a real family again. Just help us out and I cut him off with a laugh that sounded harsher than I meant. "A real family. You don't get to decide that now. A real family doesn't throw one of their own away like trash. A real family doesn't look at their child and see nothing but rent money. You had 25 years to be a real family. That time is gone." Their faces crumbled, shifting from shock to guilt to desperation. And still, I sat there, calm, grounded. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't begging them to see me. I was showing them exactly who I had become without them. The silence stretched until I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. For once, they weren't laughing. They weren't smirking. They were waiting hungry for me to save them. I stood my hands steady even though my chest was pounding. I walked to the sideboard and pulled out a plain brown envelope I had prepared weeks earlier. It wasn't for them, it was for me. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I wasn't disposable. I laid it flat on the coffee table. Their eyes followed like magnets. "What's that?" Mom asked cautiously. I slid the papers out, fanning them across the polished wood. Bold letters, crisp signatures, official stamps. The deed. This, I said evenly, is the paperwork showing the house you sold belongs to me. The room detonated. Mom staggered back like I'd slapped her. Dad's face went white, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Sarah gasped. Emma let out a shriek. "That's impossible," Mom stammered. "You don't have that kind of money." I do," I cut in sharp as a blade. "I've had it for years. While you were laughing at me, while you were telling me to pay rent, while you were leaving me behind on vacations, I was building something. A company, a life, a future. And when you decided to throw me out, you handed me the perfect chance to prove you never had control over me." Sarah's eyes darted across the documents, her voice trembling. "$3 million, you're worth over $3 million. Closer to 4 now?" I said coldly. Emma's voice rose into a screech. "If you're that rich, then you have to help us. I need a car. Mom says we can't." "Shut up, Emma." Dad barked, but even his anger sounded hollow. He turned to me, his tone shifting to something softer, almost pleading. "Amber, listen. We were wrong. We made mistakes. But we're still family. We can fix this. Just help us out. Please." I laughed, but there was no joy in it. Only bitterness sharpened into steel. Family. Where was family when you forgot my birthdays? Where was family when you made me sit alone at Christmas watching you shower Sarah and Emma with gifts? Where was family when you left me behind to watch the house while you made memories without me? When I graduated college and you chose a volleyball tournament instead? When you charged me rent in my own childhood room? Tell me where was family, then Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Amber, we didn't realize how much we were hurting you. We love you. Please. You have to believe that." "No," I said flatly, "I don't. Because love doesn't look like neglect. Love doesn't look like cruelty dressed up as parenting. Love doesn't laugh when your child cries. You loved control. You loved favoritism. You loved Sarah and Emma. But me, I was never more than background noise to you. And when you thought you could finally erase me, you sold me the very walls around us. That's who you are." Sarah tried again, her voice cracking. "We can change. We can make it right." I stepped closer, my voice low, almost whispering. "You can't change the past, and you can't rewrite me into a family that decided I wasn't worth keeping." I pointed at the deed. "This house isn't yours anymore. You sold it. You sold me, and I don't owe you a thing." The tears spilled over on Mom's cheeks. "Amber, please, don't shut us out. We need you. You needed me when you laughed in my face and left me with nothing." I shook my head. "No, you don't need me. You need my money, and you'll never get it." The words hung in the air like thunder. For a long moment, no one moved. Then I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Cool air spilled in from outside. "It's time for you to leave," I said simply. Dad rose slowly, his face gray. Sarah clutched her purse like she needed something to hold on to. Emma muttered curses under her breath. Mom lingered, last her hand on the back of the chair, her tears streaking lines down her face. "This isn't over," she whispered. "We'll find a way back to you." I looked her dead in the eye. "It is over. If you try to come back, I'll get a restraining order. You wanted me gone. Now you are." I held the door open until they filed out one by one. The click of their shoes on the porch, the creak of the steps, the sound of the car doors slamming shut. It was a symphony of endings. When I closed the door, the lock sliding into place echoed like a final verdict. The house was mine. Not because I'd begged for it, not because they'd gifted it, because I had fought silently and fiercely for a life they couldn't destroy. I looked around the living room. The papers still lay on the table, stark proof of the truth they couldn't twist. In the corner where the cracked family photo had once sat, I had placed a mirror. The glass reflected me steady, unbroken, finally whole. For years, I had begged to be seen. Tonight, I only needed to see myself. 6 months passed, and the silence became my favorite sound. No late-night calls demanding I come downstairs to clean dishes I hadn't used. No footsteps in the hallway reminding me I was the outsider in my own home. No cruel laughter when I dared to hope for something more. just quiet. And in that quiet, I built a life. Our company took off faster than even Jake or I imagined. With every new contract, with every glowing review, with every wire transfer that hit our account, I grew further from the girl who used to sit at the dinner table waiting for crumbs of affection. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was leading, I was earning, I was free. I bought a new car, not flashy, but reliable, sleek. Something that didn't rattle at stoplights. I redecorated the house from top to bottom. Each new purchase wasn't about money, it was about rewriting the story of this space. The sagging mattress replaced with one that made me feel like I was sleeping on clouds. The empty living room filled with laughter from friends who actually wanted me around. The kitchen stocked not with budget noodles, but with ingredients I chose cooked into meals I shared with people who cared. For the first time, my birthday didn't feel like a day to dread. I threw myself a small gathering with my team friends and Jake's family. We ate too much cake, played ridiculous board games, and toasted to another year of growth. When I blew out the candles, I didn't make a wish. I didn't need to. I already had everything I had ever wished for peace, respect, and a life that was mine alone. Of course, my parents tried. At first, the calls and texts came daily. Dad left voicemails, his voice suddenly tender, saying he was sorry that they wanted to make things right. Sarah sent long text paragraphs about how she missed me and wanted us to be sisters again. Emma's messages were blunt lists of things she wanted me to buy for her, as if money were the only language she knew how to speak. I ignored them all. Eventually, the calls slowed, the texts stopped, and the silence returned. One afternoon, my Aunt Linda came to visit. She was Mom's sister, always the peacemaker. She sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee, her eyes searching mine. "Amber, honey," she said softly, "I think you should consider forgiving them. They know they made mistakes. They really do want to make things right." I set my cup down steady. "Aunt Linda, I don't hate them. I don't even want revenge. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Forgiveness for me is choosing peace. And peace means not giving them another chance to hurt me." Her eyes filled with sadness, but she nodded. "I understand. I hope someday you find closure." I smiled faintly. I already have. My closure was the moment I locked that door behind them. My closure is waking up in this house knowing it's mine, not theirs. My closure is realizing I don't need them to see me anymore. I see myself. After she left, I walked into the living room. On the wall hung a large mirror, polished and clear. Where the cracked family photo used to be now, there was only my reflection. I stood there for a long moment staring at the woman I had become. Stronger, calmer, unapologetic. I thought about the girl I used to be, the teenager blowing out a candle on a cupcake alone, the college graduate sitting in an empty row of chairs, the daughter who once prayed her parents would finally notice her. I wanted to reach through the glass, take her hand and tell her it's going to be okay. One day you won't beg to be seen. One day you'll be the one holding the deed. One day you'll realize you were always enough. The house creaked softly in the evening air. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked, the sun dipped low, and the world kept turning. But inside, I felt a stillness I had never known. They had sold me out. They had abandoned me. They had laughed at my tears. And in the end, they handed me the very proof that I didn't need them. I smiled at the mirror, not at the memory of them, but at the reflection of me. Once I begged for a place at their table, I whispered, "Now I own the table. And I'll never beg again." Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter by the very people who were supposed to love you? That's what I went through, and walking away was the only way I found peace. Sometimes the family you're born into doesn't see your worth. But that doesn't mean you're worthless. If you've ever faced betrayal like this, share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and your voice deserves to be heard. And if you want more real stories of betrayal, resilience, and silent revenge, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next twist.